Hi, welcome to the Bravo webinar today. We appreciate that you all took the time to participate. My name is Silje Molander and I work at the Norwegian NARIC office. Some practical information. The webinar will last for an hour and a half today. And if you have any question, we appreciate it if you write it in the Q&A below. We have speakers today from Germany, Sweden, and Lithuania. The Bravo project is almost at the end. And my colleague Mirela will now talk about the Bravo project.
Thank you, Silje. Hi, I'm Mirela and I work at the Norwegian NARIC office. I also function as a project coordinator for the Bravo project. Bravo is a collaborative initiative between NARIC offices co-funded by the European Commission. The project's aim is mapping recognition practices and exploring the potential for a new network for recognition of foreign vocational qualifications, especially at EQF levels 4 and 5. The Bravo project consortium is made up by 3 NARIC offices, Norway, Sweden, and Lithuania. NARIC Norway has been working on recognition of vocational qualifications and training since 2016. Since 2019, we've also been handling post-secondary vocational qualifications. Both of these recognition schemes are developed in close collaboration with our social partners to ensure their relevance for the labor market. NARIC Sweden has extensive experience in evaluating qualifications at all levels. Their advisory statements compare foreign qualifications to the closest equivalent in Sweden. While it's not legally binding, it's designed to help individuals access the Swedish labor market more easily. And finally, NARIC Lithuania has recently been granted the authority to recognize vocational qualifications due to a significant increase in vocational applications. They are currently in the initial phases of establishing and operating a new recognition scheme. Together, these 3 offices bring different experience and perspectives to the Bravo project. The motivation behind the Bravo project stemmed from a clear need for better cooperation in recognition of vocational qualifications. We saw gaps not only in the availability of information about education systems, but also in the practices surrounding recognition. In our experience, most international cooperation has focused on higher education qualifications, with well-established practices outlined in tools such as the AIR Manual, the Lisbon Recognition Convention, and the Global Convention. However, vocational qualifications do not have similar recognition frameworks. This motivated us to take the initiative for the Bravo project, to address the gap by mapping the existing policies and practices for recognizing vocational qualifications. In order to define a scope for the project, we decided to focus on non-regulated qualifications on EQF levels 4 and 5. As a basis, the project looked into the European landscape frameworks and policies on recognition of vocational qualifications. EU citizens and their family members have the fundamental right to move and work freely within the EU. This also applies to citizens of Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. Through the European Economic Era, while it's relatively straightforward in the EU EEA citizens to work in non-regulated professions across borders, employers still have the final say in hiring, which can sometimes create barriers. For individuals outside the EU, the process is even more complex. The European Commission has recognized that the lack of qualification recognition is an obstacle to employment for third country nationals. Recently, there have been new recommendations aimed at improving recognition procedures for qualifications obtained outside the EU. which could help address the growing need for skilled workers across Europe. The political landscape concerning recognition of vocational qualifications has been explored throughout both of the project reports. I will now give the word to my colleague Julieta, who works at NARIC Sweden, to help me present the findings of the project survey and the workshops.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mirella, for the introduction. I'm going to share with you some selected key findings, just to give you an overview of the result of the project. And as Mirella mentioned, one of the key activities of the Bravo project has been to identify how European countries, and in particular NARIC offices, are currently working with recognition of vocational qualifications. To gather this information, we sent a survey with several questions to all the NARIC centers, but also to other recognition authorities that are outside the network when those were identified. A shorter questionnaire was later sent to the countries that didn't respond to the survey, and because of this approach, some of the graph I will show you include all the respondents, and in some cases, the graph includes part of the respondents. On this map, you can see the represented countries in the Bravo project. Out of the 56 countries that are part of the NARIC network, we gather information from 44 countries. Next slides, please. Our findings reveal that out of the 44 NARIC center survey, 25 centers assess vocational qualifications, and 19 centers don't assess vocational qualifications due to the lack of mandate. Among the 19 centers that don't assess vocational qualifications, 13 countries acknowledge the existence of another organization or other organizations responsible for recognition of vocational qualifications. Our finding indicates that the nature of these organizations varies widely, ranging from professional chambers to NQF authorities, Ministry of Education, and agencies with the specific task of assessing vocational qualifications. Next slide, please. To those NARIC centers and recognition authorities that reported assessing vocational qualifications, we asked them to indicate whether the assessment represents what we call a content-based assessment or a level assessment. The Bravo project defined content-based assessment as the assessment of the content of the foreign qualifications against the national occupational standards for a specific occupation. For example, the occupational standard of a carpenter or a butcher. We define level assessment as the assessment of the foreign qualification with a generic vocational qualification or a vocational educational level, but not a specific occupation. Our findings shows that 90% of the respondents indicated their assessment represent a level assessment, and 43% of the respondents indicated that their assessment represent a content-based assessment. We are, however, aware that the division is not clear-cut, and that in some cases a level assessment may include some type of content description of the qualification or some information about what the qualification prepare for in the home country. As you can see in the picture, 14% responded to do not make any kind of comparison with any kind of reference point, that they just make a description of the vocational qualification. Next slide, please. We wanted also to gather some information about the educational level of the vocational qualification these recognition authorities are working with. And as you can see in the picture, 58% indicated assessing vocational upper secondary education, and 61% indicated assessing vocational post-secondary education. Next slide, please. When it comes to recognition criteria, we were interested in knowing whether the recognition authorities had a separate recognition criteria for vocational qualification, or if they use the same one as for higher education qualifications. We wanted to know also to what extent the principles of the Lisbon Recognition Convention were used in the assessment of vocational qualifications. And our findings indicate that 80% of the respondents respondents are using the principles of the LRC in the recognition of vocational qualifications, as you can see in the picture on the right, and then as you can see in the picture on the left, 65% of the respondents indicated using the same recognition criteria for vocational education as for all type of education, which we translate as higher education. We think that these numbers should be taken anyway with some caution, since it is not always easy to make a clear distinction between recognition under the LRC and beyond the LRC. We identify something that we call a gray area of education and educational practices for vocational qualification at EQF level 5 and level 6, since those sometimes may fall under the scope of the LRC and sometimes not, depending on how they are considered and defined, if they can define as higher education qualification or if they are defined as higher vocational qualifications. Next, please. We were also interested in looking at the examine to what extent the stakeholders were involved in the recognition procedures. And here we could see that more than half of the respondents indicate to do not collaborate in the recognition procedures, whereas the other half, 48%, indicated to do cooperate with stakeholders. And we could identify that this cooperation varies among countries, and that stakeholders may come from represent the industry sector, the labor organization, and educational institutions. Next slide, please. We were also interested in gathering information about the tools and resources used when assessing vocational qualifications. And here our data indicates that EQF and NQF, as you can see in the picture, are widely used to understand and compare vocational qualifications. Also the case of Europass and specific certificate supplement, as you can see, 60% of the respondents. When it comes to the resources, we can observe that the majority of the respondents indicated using the national NARIC website as a source of information for vocational educations, but there are other sorts of informations like the information that you can find on CEDEFOP, ETF, and ReferNet are very useful for those assessing vocational qualifications. Next slide, please. The use of the existing EU tools for recognition of vocational qualifications has been a topic of discussion of one of our internal workshops. We examined these tools and structured them around the 5 key elements model for describing qualifications that is outlined in the year manual. And even the year manual is not intended for recognition of vocational qualifications. Credential evaluators assessing vocational qualifications still need to establish the quality, the level, the workflow, the profile, and the learning outcome of the qualification. We could identify here that the quality control of the educational vet provider is one of the most challenging steps. The experience is that it is more difficult to obtain information about accredited vet providers compared to higher education institutions. The same situation when it comes to verification of vet credentials submitted by the applicant. This is also very challenging compared to higher education. The same here, much more has to be done within the higher education sector to prevent fraud in comparison to the vet sector. And we have also observed that the use of these tools vary among countries depending on how their recognition schemes have been set up. For example, countries applying a content-based assessment, as I mentioned before, may focus more on the learning outcomes of the qualification and use the tools related to these needs than other countries where the focus is put on the level of the qualification. We could identify that EQF is a widely used tool to understand how a particular qualification relates to each other in the European context. And it also works as a gatekeepers of quality assured qualifications. Certificate supplement is identified as a very useful tool since it provides quality assured information related to the 5 elements of the qualification. We all agree in the project that the certificate supplement consistent way to describe qualifications, facilitate recognition, and foster trust for foreign vocational qualifications. That is all for me, so thank you, and over to you, Mirella.
So the second option considers the establishment of an independent network, specifically for vocational qualifications. While this could provide tailored solutions and flexibility, it risks administrative challenges and creating confusion alongside the existing NARIC framework. In summary, the project thinks that we are at a point where expanding our focus to recognition of vocational qualifications is essential to meet the evolving needs of the education labor markets in Europe, and we have to consider how to do so. The first task ahead would be the establishment of the network itself. Initially, we would need to initiate and structure the network, drawing on the experience that we already have within the NARIC community and from other stakeholders. One of the most relevant tasks for the network could be centralizing information about vocational qualifications. This involves gathering data on existing information sources, how different countries organize their education systems, and how they assess these qualifications. Facilitating collaboration and experience sharing among evaluators is another key aspect. By creating opportunities for networking, we can create a community that shares experiences and best practices, which strengthens our recognition efforts. Additionally, the network could promote best practices without enforcing uniformity, allowing for flexibility while motivating each other to discover better ways to organize our work. Lastly, the network could support new centers in establishing recognition schemes for vocational qualifications. These responsibilities would ensure that credential evaluators can access information and collaborate effectively with colleagues across borders. The results of the Bravo survey indicated that all proposed topics for the network to focus on were seen as relevant by the respondents. There is a clear interest in tools and best practice sharing, quality assurance, and information about vocational education systems in EU countries. Many expressed a desire for cooperation through mechanisms like a mailing list or other more advanced forums. Several respondents mentioned their interest in learning about vocational qualifications from third countries, qualifications that provide access to higher education, and verification tools. When asked about their interest in participating in a network, a significant majority responded positively, indicating a strong interest to join a network for EQF qualifications 4 and 5, and later maybe on other levels as well. While it is uncertain whether this project will culminate in an official network, we are very optimistic that we will lay the groundwork to establish one. Creating a network for recognition of vocational qualifications also presents several challenges that we must navigate carefully. One of the most crucial challenges is the need for a common language and standardized definitions among stakeholders. The lack of a shared vocabulary regarding vocational qualifications can create significant barriers, as due to different understandings of terms and definitions in the conversation about recognition of vocational qualifications. This is a significant challenge that a network would have to navigate. We also face challenges related to the varied national recognition landscapes. Each country operates under its own legislative frameworks and practices. While some NARIC centers handle both academic and vocational recognitions, others may have even broader or more limited scopes. Attracting and maintaining diverse and active members is another challenge. Many recognition offices may not see the immediate benefits of joining a new network, making it essential to clearly communicate the advantages of participation. We also need to ensure the network remains relevant to all members. And lastly, the economic, administrative, and technical aspects of running such a network are important to figure out. Managing day-to-day operations will require dedication to ensure smooth functioning and effective collaboration among members. When considering how to proceed to create a network for recognition of vocational qualifications, we have to look into the different alternatives in front of us. The second project report outlines the different alternatives and concludes with the project recommendation. The first option is to extend the existing NARIC network, for example, by creating a subgroup specifically for vocational qualifications. We can start with centers that already handle vocational qualifications and gradually include others, ensuring a manageable process. The second option involves establishing an independent network for recognition of vocational qualifications. While this could provide a focused approach tailored to specific needs, it comes with challenges such as building a new administrative structure. The third alternative, which we refer to as the zero option, suggests maintaining the current situation without creating a dedicated network. While this may seem easier in the short term, we see many benefits that are not realized with this current approach. Therefore, the recommended approach for the project is to extend the NARIC network. The strategy leverages the existing trust and structures, leading to a more efficient path forward. Additionally, it would enhance the NARIC network's relevance in addressing the need of today's society. The project proposes a step-by-step implementation process, starting with offices already involved in vocational qualifications recognition. Initially, the focus could be on information sharing using existing tools before potentially moving towards more advanced collaborative platforms later. Engaging with key stakeholders will be important in understanding their needs and refining our approach. In conclusion, by adopting these recommendations and assessing both short-term and long-term strategies, we can work towards a more integrated and effective system for recognizing vocational qualifications across Europe, ultimately benefiting credential evaluators, individual applicants, and employers alike. Should you want to go into further detail, all the topics that were addressed today are comprehensively discussed in the first project report that was published in 2023, and the second project report, which will be published at the end of this month. If you would like to know more about the project, feel free to contact us, visit our webpage, or follow us on LinkedIn. I will now give the word back to Silje, who will introduce the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Mirela and Julieta, of this presentation of the Bravo project. And now our partners in Lithuania, they have been establishing a recognition scheme while being a part of the Bravo project. Aurelia Valkariene works as a deputy director at the Lithuanian Quality Assurance Agency and NARIC Center. Her areas of expertise include external quality assurance of higher education, academic recognition of foreign qualification, and internationalization. She has worked as an expert locally and internationally on various projects. So Aurelia is here to talk about the status of the recognition of VET in Lithuania, because like you heard before, it has changed since the beginning of this Bravo project. So Aurelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Silje, very much for this kind introduction. I will now start sharing my screen and let's see how this works. I hope it's the full screen mode.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. We have been partners of the Bravo project and very grateful for the possibility to learn and share experiences. And it happens so that the changes in our legislative framework came just in the middle of this project, of which we are very glad. And I will share our approach, which is an example of the system level assessment. To shortly introduce SKVC, we serve as Academic Information and Recognition Center, Lithuanian NARIC office. Previously, we were in charge of recognition of access qualifications, mainly secondary education qualifications and higher education qualifications placed on first cycle and second cycle. Then our mandate was expanded to the short cycle with the introduction of short cycle qualifications in Lithuania as well. We also act as quality assurance agency for higher education, levels 5 to 7. The research evaluation and other aspects of research management are within the Lithuanian Research Council. And one of the most recent functions that we have is issuing licenses to vocational education and training providers. This is from last September, so just a year of expanded mandate into the VET sector. So both in recognition, starting from this June, and issuing licenses from last September. The main activities of ourselves as NARIC, as I mentioned, we do directly academic recognition and we issue legally binding statements. We also do conversion of grades and comparability of subjects of secondary school leavers, graduates who wish to access further studies either in VET or in higher education in Lithuania. And in those cases, when they wish to receive state support, so-called state vouchers, we do this service during the period of common admission, and we closely work with the general admission system in Lithuania. We also provide information, whomever is interested in that, be it colleagues in our NARIC networks, be it employers or institutions or individuals. We also arrange a number of training events during the year and provide consultations tailored to specific needs. We also have a very specific function, making sure that everybody who is in recognition in Lithuania abides to the Lisbon Recognition Convention as the framework. So we monitor decisions made by higher education institutions, and most recently, with the change of legislation in June this year, the task was expanded to also encompass vocational education and training providers and the Lithuanian Research Council, so that we could produce an overarching analysis and supply it to the ministry and share with other interested stakeholders to see where Lithuania is in terms of Lisbon Recognition Convention implementation. And of course, it's very important to stay up to date, so development of recognition methodologies and tools by the means of projects or otherwise, for example, exchange visits and other opportunities, is of big interest and also a very important task of ours. Our services are provided digitally. We moved to full digital provision of recognition statements just before the pandemic broke, 2 weeks before, and this was very fortunate that we were completely ready and could smoothly continue providing our services in that difficult period. Now, getting ready for the recognition of VET qualifications, that entailed some activities. The first was participation in the European Social Fund funded project together with our VET authority in Lithuania, who is also in charge of the national qualifications framework. We were a partner there, and by the means of this project, we expanded our EPA portal for the digital provision of services for VET qualification holders. We also created and tested the methodology and organized a number of events starting to engage with VET providers. And another milestone project is this project, Bravo project, coordinated by our colleagues at HK-dir. We are the partners there, and as just was presented by Mirella and Silje, we are looking into the possibilities to extend the networking and also getting more information about how offices work and what we can share and learn from each other. Why VET qualifications? For a very long period of time, there was no authority in Lithuania in charge of such recognition, but we saw the growing interest. And here you see on the screen the number of inquiries and qualifications supplied to us, which did not fall into the usual categories with which we worked. That is, they were neither secondary nor higher education qualifications. And you can see that the interest is there, though fluctuating, but still there. So, feeling this necessity for the services, we started to work within SKVC and also with our partners. So the year 2018 was when we initiated discussions regarding the new framework. In 2022, we put the legal proposal for legislation change to be approved by the government of Lithuania. And obviously, such an important change needs to be agreed with all stakeholders. And this was finalized this year on 15th of June, when the government approved the new framework, the new legislation. In terms of recognition of what we see, we are a rather small office, 8 persons. Last year, we totally received almost 4,000 applications. Majority of these are by individuals, but year by year, we see the increase in requests from employers and educational institutions for recommendations to them how they should treat qualifications. You see this graph for the 9 years, how it looks, our workload. The dip in 2018 was related to the introduction of the statement, which would prove that the applicant has serious intentions in Lithuania. Either he or she is considered for studies or further learning, or the employer is there already considering this applicant. This helped to reduce the number of applications where people were just looking the ways to enter the EU and had no concrete plans in Lithuania. Even though in 2023 our numbers decreased somewhat, but it was compensated by very large increase of applications which were dealt by institutions. And we supported higher education institutions and other institutions in advising them how to deal with recognition. As to the general recognition infrastructure, currently, after the legislation was passed, we have the expanded and partially decentralized system. It means that SKVC as NARIC is there to make legally binding decisions for all kinds of purposes. Higher education institutions which have authorization from the Ministry of Science, Education and Sport can process qualifications for study purposes at that particular institution. In case the institution has no internationalization, which would be backed by big experience and by proper staff, we would help those institutions and make decisions for them. But majority of our universities and colleges of higher education already deal with the applicants directly. Lithuanian Council of Research are in charge of recognition of doctoral qualifications, and the novelty with this legislation is that VET providers are there to make recognition decisions as well. we are supporting them with recommendations. And it's very important, according to the Lisbon Recognition Convention, to assure applicants' right to appeal decisions. And there are 3 different appeals commissions. Decisions made by ourselves and the Research Council of Lithuania are analyzed by the Appeals Commission at the Ministry, which is Interinstitutional Commission. There is a separate commission set up for the decisions made by VET providers scrutiny. And as KVC, as Lithuanian NARIC office, we look into complaints and appeals regarding recognition decisions made by our higher education institutions. So this is the new infrastructure. As you can see, a lot of actors participating there. In terms of distribution of applications from where we get diplomas for recognition, 4 regions are very prominent. That is European Union and European Economic Area and Switzerland. This is the majority of cases. Other European countries also take a big toll there. Then come Asian countries and African countries, and very little qualifications from further away. And in terms of recognition of VET qualifications, what we saw so far, it's mainly from Ireland and UK, where Lithuanian immigrant community is the largest, and also we get VET qualifications from our neighboring countries. That is Latvia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. These are the most pronounced countries. In terms of the methodology application, we do apply the same principles as for access and higher education qualifications. That is, working according to the 5 elements of the qualification. The level obviously is very important to be determined if we deal with that qualification, the workload and duration, and the learning outcomes. So this is for access and higher education, and specifically for VET qualifications, it's important to establish the education subfield in order to make a comparison to a certain qualification or most probably to the level in our framework. So what are most important characteristics, whether we process the application or not, is to establish if the qualification is a formal qualification or awarded in that particular education system. Then to see whether it is a VET sector or post-secondary education and training, but not higher education. Then we see that the entire learning process is completed, and if the final qualification is obtained, not just individual modules or partial learning, which would be the object for work for VET providers, but the final qualification. And in order to find a comparison in Lithuanian qualifications framework, the qualification has to be of a similar size to those that we have in Lithuania. And that is 30 credits for initial vocational education and training, or 20 credits for continuous education and training. In terms of decisions, what kind of decisions could be made? There are 3 types of recognition without any conditions. And that is to recognize the qualification as corresponding to a particular Lithuanian qualification, but that is a very rare case in VET. Then to establish correspondence to partial learning or partial studies. We have seen some of such examples, but most prominently with VET qualifications, we would establish correspondence to a level on Lithuanian qualifications framework. And that might be level 3, level 4, most often, sometimes level 5. Then there are alternative recognitions, that is, with certain rights granted or with additional requirements. And obviously, non-recognition is an option as well. Till today, we haven't got such a case with a VET qualification. Most often, it would be not an object to our recognition if we would deny our services. But then we would advise to turn to the educational provider or to go directly to the labor market. This is one of the examples of qualifications received. This is from UK, as you can see, Edexcel Level 3 BTEC National Qualification in Civil Engineering. And what we learned with VET qualifications recognition is that qualifications differ a lot, and you cannot judge a qualification by the name. As the content, even though we are not digging very deep into it, we are still looking into our occupational standards and trying to establish comparability. But most often that is very hard to make. So we make decisions assessing to the level. So what kind of challenges we have in VET recognition? First of all, we are very new in this field, working just from mid-June this year. We see that some problematic issues in our own VET system come more prominently when we seek to do recognition of foreign qualifications. In some cases, we lack guidance on duration of VET qualifications in Lithuania. They might be very different as well. Then the challenge is identification of information sources or lack of information altogether. So thanks to Bravo project, we know now of several sources possible, but it happens so that not every time we find exhaustive information, the one which is needed to the level of detail needed. So this is still a challenge. Then when we do the level recognition, establishing comparability with a certain occupation in Lithuania, as I mentioned already, might be challenging as well. For example, the qualification that we recently saw from Ukraine of a medical nurse was obtained after 2 years of education, and the person was enrolled after completion of general secondary education and has possibilities to continue studies on the bachelor level. This qualification broadly falls within the healthcare and beauty sector, but we don't have such an exact qualification in Lithuania. So we compare to the level then. And the constant challenge to us as the NARIC office is obviously collection, accumulation, and analysis of information so that we build our knowledge base. And we project that with time we will see increased mobility flows. So it's a constant challenge to satisfy the needs for advice and for recognition with the resources available. Therefore, optimization of our work, digitalization is of utmost importance now and for the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Aurelia. It's been quite interesting to follow you on this journey to actually establishing the recognition scheme, because it's been a while since you started talking about doing that. I was just curious, Aurelia, have you had any feedback from the stakeholders, the labor market, or the people who have received a positive decision from your office? Have you had any feedback from them?
In general, I would say people are very glad that now we provide such a service, because early on we could only issue some information about the qualification, as was also mentioned in the study, what other NARIC centers do. But obviously, this is not to the satisfaction level of people who seek more concrete information. So being able to support them for the purposes of further study or to get access to the labor market, this has been important, and we saw especially huge interest on the part of politicians, so that we finally greet our expats, are more welcome to them in Lithuania and provide such a service, but also from individuals who are increasingly coming back to Lithuania.
Thank you so much, Aurelia. And just a reminder, if you have any question, feel free to ask them in the Q&A. We have a panel here ready to answer your questions. And now our next speaker is from Germany, Christina Leininger. She's an economist at the German Economic Institute, and she's been working there since 2019 as a country expert in India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Syria, Iran, and all English-speaking countries. And Gesina, she's here to talk about how you recognize VET in Germany, but also a very interesting survey you have been doing for the German employers. So the floor is yours, Gesina.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. And then I will start right away. I will give you a short introduction of the BQ portal and what we do, and then talk about the recognition process in Germany, and also about the survey we just did for company insights on the recognition in Germany. So the BQ portal, what do we do? We launched at the same time as the Recognition Act over 10 years ago, and we are founded by the Federal of Ministry and Economics and Climate Protection. We are an information portal for foreign professional qualifications. Our objective was an improvement of transparency, uniformity, and speed of the evaluation procedures in Germany, since in Germany we have 16 states, and every state has its own chambers of crafts or chambers of commerce, and they are responsible for the recognition. And before we came into place, it was very time consuming and inconsistent and incomprehensible for all those competent bodies doing the work. If like there was a carpenter from Syria and the applicant was in Cologne, and the Chamber of Crafts started like looking into the education system and gathering all the information and just did it by itself. And then maybe half a year later, there's also a carpenter from Syria, but in Munich. And then the Chamber of Crafts in Munich would do the same work. So the BQ portal breaks this isolation of the competent bodies and creates like a big database where every chamber can gather and use the same information. And today, because of the BQ portal, it's more efficient, it's more transparent, it's knowledge-based. Everyone can fill in the information if you're a competent body, and it's very objective. So to get a better understanding, we have country profiles and professional profiles. So let's stay with the example from Syria. You get an applicant from Syria, you can look at the country profile in the BQ portal, and either we will implement the information we just got from the applicant from Syria, or there was another applicant years before, and all the informations are already there in the professional profile. We have 105 country profiles with the structure and regulation of foreign vocational education training systems, and more than 5,800 professional profiles within those country profiles, where you can get the information on the content and the duration of this particular vocational training program. And what we do as a country expert in the BQ portal, we research the education system of those foreign countries. We also keep the country profile up to date. If there are any changes in the reforms, we're trying to like be up to date and put it in the country profile as an information. We do the search for the curriculars for the competent bodies, and we try to support in this way the recognition procedures. And if necessary, we also get in touch with the legal authorities in those countries. So if we have this carpenter from Syria, because in Germany we have a content-based assessment, we would need the curricula, and then we would try and help the competent body to get this curricula and get the information about where is it located, is this post-secondary or secondary level, is it a 2-year training, all those information needed we will try to gather for this particular applicant. And yeah, what is the recognition assessment and procedure in Germany? Who needs recognition in Germany? We have the regulated professions. That means all nations. The recognition is mandatory in the profession for, let's say, doctors, teachers, lawyers. In non-regulated professions, this is the field the BQ portal works. The EU, the EEA, and Switzerland. It's not mandatory. It's an advantage if you have the recognition, but you can work anyhow. And it's for all the dual vocational training programs we have in Germany. And if you have a non-regulated profession from a third nation, it's again mandatory, although it's a dual vocational training. You would need the recognition to start working in that profession. And according to the provisions of the Skilled Immigration Act, a full recognition is also mandatory for non-regulated professions for reasons of residence law. So what do you need for recognition in Germany? You need an official degree from the country of origin and a translated version to German. Even though it's an English degree, you need a translated version. It needs to be at a state accredited institution. If it's not at a state accredited institution, you cannot get into the recognition procedure in Germany. And also it needs to have a minimum duration of 1 year. That can actually vary a little bit from the competent bodies and the states in Germany. Some say 1 year is enough. Others say you need 1.5 or 2 years. That's because in Germany, we will always compare the vocational training to a German reference qualification. And in Germany, the dual vocational training programs are in general 3 or 3.5 years. And it needs to be comparable. If it's just 6 months or 8 months, it cannot be compared to a German reference qualification because it's not long enough. You also need the official curricula because we have a content-based assessment. And what's very important, it needs to be valid at the time the applicant did his training. So if we have the carpenter from Syria, and the degree is from 2009, the curricula needs to be from that period of time. If it's the curricula from, I don't know, 2020, it would not be able to be recognized for this procedure. And this is trying to show you the way the procedure would go. So if you have a state accredited qualification with a minimum of 1 year, you can enter the recognition process, and then you have a content-based assessment. And now there are 2 options this could go. You have the curriculum is available and everything is fine. You get a full equivalent, you're ready to work, you can enter the labor market. But let's say your training was like 1.5 years, and it just cannot be compared enough to the German reference qualifications. You have little deficits in your training, you get a partial equivalence. Then you would also get an individual assessment. That means that they will look at your further trainings, even if they are 3 weeks, 3 months, they will now be taken into account, and also work experience. And then this can even out and you can get a full equivalence, or you do a knowledge test or an adaptation qualification. That means you maybe go for do an internship for half a year in a German company, and then you get the full equivalent. If the curriculum actually is not available, you can do a qualification analysis, and that would mean you do like an interview, or you do a work piece, anything they could to evaluate if you really learned what you say you learned, and then you can go the same way, like a partial equivalence or full equivalence, and enter the labor market. There are little cases of where you get no equivalence and you cannot enter the labor market based on your profession. But if it's a non-formal or informal training, you can't even start the process of the recognition. What's also important to know is that the introduction of the FEG in 2020 and the amendment in 2024 had no major changes in the BQFG. That's the law we work with for the vocational trainings. And there's one exception, that now, since March 2024, you can recognize your profession. Let's say you were a chef in Indonesia, and now you have a work possibility to work here in Germany as a car mechatronics or a carpenter or anything. If your chef degree gets recognized, you can work as this technician. If the company in Germany wants you and they say, yeah, you fulfill our needs, that's something new, and that's something we're very interested on, how this will actually be taken on by the companies, how many will use that. But that's a new way of entering the labor market in Germany. And now to the survey we just finished. So the idea was to get an insight of what companies really need in terms of recognition, where they see potential and where they see obstacles, and if there are any needs on the side of the companies in terms of recognition which we are not aware of. And so we did a representative survey through the Institute, and our aim was to survey around 800 companies. And we did this in a multi-topic survey. So we had different blocks and combined them. And one block was the recognition part. And there we hope to get insights about the information status. How well informed are the companies? What do they need? What do they want? And how important is this topic of recognition for German companies? And what's the experiences? What experience do companies have with vocational recognition, and what obstacles did they encounter? And yeah, to get more information from there to actually see the potential. What measurements do we really need to implement to make recognition more important, maybe for companies? What do companies need to make recognition a really ongoing tool for placing skilled workers in their company? And for that, we actually were able to ask 815 companies in Germany. We had 9 questions in that one block in the survey that were regarding the recognition of professional qualifications. And we had 11 weeks of field work, which just finished. So we don't really have like a real survey answer results we can show you, but just to give you an example of what we did. And now we are like assessing all the results, and if that's ready, we're more than happy to give you more insights on it. But what I can tell you are the key data we used are, for us, most important were the size of the companies, the industry sector, and the region, to like get the information. Does it make a difference if you are in Northern Germany, if you're in South Germany. We have some issues with East Germany and the way they have problems tolerating migration there. So does that even have an effect on the recognition procedure? And also there were key data for recruitment challenges, the level of digitalization and vocational training activities of those companies. And here is like a really short insight I could give you. For example, we had the question, do you support your employees seeking recognition of their foreign vocational qualification through the following measures? And then we had like the possibility for them to like click on different measures, and 240 companies could actually place their answers there. And what we now see is that the companies provide a wide range of support for applicants in different ways. They're really aware of their role and what applicants need for support during the recognition process. It was like financial support or support gathering all the information, doing the paperwork, getting free time to go to the appointments and all those sort of things. And what we also asked was the Skilled Immigration Act has recently been updated. How do you assess the following new opportunities for skilled workers from non-EU countries? And over 800 companies placed their answer. And that is quite new because the updated Skilled Immigration Act is really recent. And we never really got a feedback until now from companies how they actually use it, how they feel about it. And it was quite a positive assessment of the revision. And they say they like it because now the applicants can come and start working whilst the recognition procedure is still ongoing. That is new. And that they can work in a different profession than their recognition is also seen very positive. So we are really excited about what the results really will give us on information on the company side to get a better insight and understanding of what companies need in terms of recognition. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gesine, for a very interesting insight in finding out what does actually our decision mean for the end user, and also for the very useful information we find on the BQ portal. At least I know my colleagues here at our office, they're very happy for all the information on the BQ portal, and we've been collaborating about the curricula as well. So that's really, really nice. And also, in addition to Gesine and Aurelia, we have other colleagues from Sweden ready to talk here. So welcome to the webinar, Mishka and Per-Anders, or Pea. You're also part of the Bravo project. And I was just wondering if you would like to say something about a survey who's been conducted in Sweden as well, since we talked about that with the BQ portal. So I'm not sure, Mishka, do you want to say something about that?
I think Per-Anders is the one that has been involved in this project. So maybe you can start, Per-Anders.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, prior to the COVID, we realized that we had limited information how the labor market viewed our statement for secondary and post-secondary vet qualifications. So the agency decided to conduct a survey. We sent out a questionnaire to several employers in different branches and asked of their view of our statement. Is it trustworthy? How do you use it? What type of information is good for you? And to our relief, the answers were in general positive. What they mainly liked was to see the level of the education, that it was completed, correctly documented and authentic. In some cases, they wanted more information regarding the content, but it's mainly with health care and so on. And we got the information that it's mainly used early on in the recruitment process. So with a statement, it increases your chances to go on in the process of this recruitment. And it's also shown that it increases the trust because there is a proximity principle that the closer the qualification is to the country, the more trust you feel for it, and the further away, not distrust, but there is a bit of caution. But with the statement, it was compensated, and there is a lot of trust because it's sent out. It's a statement from a government agency, so it was positive in general.
Thank you. And I can also add that's also the experience in the Norwegian surveys that's been conducted. And it's also reassuring for the employers to know it's been authentic or the authenticity of the documents have been verified. So that's also something very important for us as credentials evaluators to think about. But now when we have representatives from both Lithuania, Sweden, and Germany, I just want to have a question for all of you. What are your experiences with the focus of VET in your country? So maybe we can start with Aurelia.
Thank you. We have seen diplomas of various sectors, but I would say that healthcare and beauty sector was the one. Then we saw qualifications attesting to education sector, various small VET qualifications in that. Several would have been in engineering. So this is as much as I can recall from the memory, since I'm signing digitally all the statements that my colleagues are producing. So these would be the primary sectors.
Thank you. But also, if I may ask, do you experience, is it the same interest when it comes to VET, or has it been an increase or decrease, or what's your experience in the labor market or at the end users in Lithuania?
It's still early to say the statistics, since we see fluctuations in months, and as we started in the middle of June, we will count the chickens, so to say, at the new year time. But what we are definitely collaborating with and seeing an interest is, as I have already mentioned, working with our expat communities to help them come back and reintegrate into the country. There has been a special initiative by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a special portal which is called Grįžtu, and this is translated like coming back, where people can find all pertinent information in one place. And that pertains to further studies of learning of children or own studies, then social security, healthcare, various issues which is important for people to find, and information on recognition procedures, on the timelines, on everything is also there. We also take part in informal discussions together with stakeholders, most importantly, the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Economy. So we are in close collaboration with them as, I would say that not so much is attracting of foreigners to Lithuania is of interest as helping to return those citizens who at the beginning of independence left Lithuania because of very hard economic times that we had. And since Lithuania made a huge progress Now people are coming back, so our target audience very much is those expat communities. And also we see quite large numbers of individuals from Ukraine and Belarus. And this might be related to the war by Russia.
Thank you, Aurelia. And Gesina, the same questions for you. What are your experiences with the focus of assessing that?
Well, in Germany, we have quite a big need for skilled workers in the vet sector, because we have a big lack of skilled workers, and due to the fact that we have 330 dual vocational trainings in Germany, it's quite prioritized. But we just got the numbers from the last recognition statistic of 2023, and only 18% of all the recognition applications were for VET. So for us, the focus is there, and we need more applicants that want to come to Germany and work there. But yeah, I don't know how we can, we need to get more foreign professionals to be interested in work in that field in Germany.
Mm-hmm. And to the Swedish office, I'm not sure who wants to answer this question.
Yeah, maybe I can say something about that. We have been evaluating vet qualification for quite some time right now, and the study that Pia mentioned, I think we need to sort of evaluate that study and sort of expand our cooperation with the labor market. I think we need to change our methodology, sort of focusing on meeting the expectation of the labor market. That is a bit of a challenge, I think, because the labor market is ever changing, especially in vets.
Mm.
I think we will need to focus on that one a bit more.
Mm.
Thank you.
Mm. But after listening to today's different presentations, both from Bravo, Lithuania, and the BQ portal, is there anything that surprised you didn't know, or what surprised you the most? Gesina, do you want to start?
Well, I always find it for us, quite surprising that the content and the curricula really don't matter so much in other countries, and that the focus is so much on the levels. And I would wish for Germany that they would kind of shift and look at the levels as well. But yeah, I find it quite interesting what SKVC is now implemented in June, and looking forward how this will proceed in the future, and how that will work out. Yeah.
Mm. Aurelia, do you want to answer the same question?
Yes, thank you. Definitely very interesting to learn the German experience and to listen to our Swedish colleagues. What I can say regarding the content analysis or the real skills of those vet qualification holders, there is a separate system for recognition of professional skills. SKVC, we deal with the academic part of vet qualifications. Therefore, for us, it makes sense to focus on the level and do level assessment. I'm completely aware that if an employer wishes to hire a builder, very specific skills might be in the focus, and we are not there for that need. So there might be a need to go to the test to obtain the professional recognition of vet qualifications, which is the system which is supported by our Vocational Education and Training Authority, KPMPC. In the project that we worked on our part of recognition methodology, there were in parallel many activities in establishing those centers and preparing for this professional recognition of professional skills of vet qualification holders. So perhaps this makes the picture for Lithuania more complete. because I do understand, like in Germany, that specific skills for the employers are most pertinent. And to make sense of all this wealth of information, of wealth of qualifications, such service as Gesine is working must be wonderful.
Thank you. And from the Swedish office?
Yes, thank you, Celia. I think when looking back at the webinar today, I think I was most surprised with that so many offices actually evaluate that qualifications. I wasn't really aware of that before the project started. And when seeing that there is a great potential in cooperation in this area, because all the offices face the same challenges when you evaluate vets. But I was quite surprised by the number of offices. And just one last thing, I was also surprised that there's a great interest in joining a vet network, because I think every office has very much to do right now. We're quite swamped with our tasks, but I think the interest shows how important expanding a network, including vet qualifications, is. So I was happily surprised by that.
But what are the needs that the European Network for Recognition of what vet qualification can respond to? What can it answer? What kind of question can the network answer out, or what can it be used for? The Swedish office, do you want to start this time?
Yes, thank you. I will start. I think the webinar has gone through some of the things that we see. I think a potential network or expanded network could sort of help providing structured and gathered information about vet qualifications. And I think we could all offices could actually need a dedicated counterparts in the greater Europe area that provide information about vet qualifications and contacts as well. And I think that the obvious part is sort of best practice sharing through workshops or facilitate meetings or conferences.
Per, do you want to add something? You're muted.
No, I agree with Miska. I think the information sharing to help each other to get the information, to be able to issue statements that are correct and help the labor market with the needs they demands of us. And I mean, Sweden, as in Germany, we need skilled workers.
Gesine?
Yeah, I think that we can mostly benefit if we keep sharing information and keep having an exchange about experiences and how we use all our databases. And I mean, the BQ portal, for example, it's an open source, but it's only in German. So that's quite an obstacle, I think, that like everyone can really use our information. And yeah, we are now trying to implement in our visualization, in our graphics of the education system, also the levels. So although it's not important for the German part, it helps for other countries to get a better idea of where it's supposed to be, I don't know, ranked. And we are starting to do so with the new graphics, but it will take, of course, some time to get it implemented.
And Aurela, the same question goes for you.
The same answer. Information sharing and identification of sources, and hopefully expansion of those sources as well. The world is very large, but information on the national qualifications framework is not available on all countries. And we need that. Hopefully there is a role to play for other European organizations, and they could step in with expanding their currently hold resources. So I hope that this project can contribute to that as well. And also I hope that this project can contribute to sharing of information and ideas regarding quality assurance of that. It's not the same as in higher education. It's not the same as in secondary education, but it's visible that in some cases our own system would benefit from some of the practices and expansion. So for the sake of quality assurance itself, I believe there could be interesting bits and parts for the other national authorities there as well.
And I can just say that both Lithuania, Sweden, and Norway are also NARIC offices. So we're kind of used to having this network, and we have this a mailing list, and we have information, we have different sources. But the BQ portal, you're not a part of the NARIC office. But do you cooperate with the NARIC office in German, and to what extent do you do that?
Well, of course, we have an exchange and a knowledge of one another, but it's not going into the depth it, I think, could go to benefit from one another on a higher level. Yeah.
But I know from talking to you before, Gesine, you're very interested in joining such a network that we're talking about, that we're dreaming about.
Yes, that's correct.
So that's really good. Well, I don't think I have any more questions to any of you participants. So, and I don't think we have any questions in the Q&A either. So I would just like to thank you all for joining in today, and we'll stay tuned on the Bravo webpage if you have any more, if you want more information. And after this webinar, we will send you a survey. So hopefully you can answer that, so we can have more information on how to work on further webinars. So thank you all.